Hello and welcome. You're watching Amhara Media Corporation English Service Messenger program. My name is Yohannes Jallo. Government of Ethiopia and Tigray People Liberation Front have signed a peace agreement. The agreement is designed not to bring a temporary relief rather than to bring about a permanent end to the conflict. The question is, could this agreement bring an end to this conflict? To discuss this very important question, I have a special guest today. My guest is a renowned peace and security scholar, Dr. Yonas Adeto. Dr. Yonas obtained his PhD from the University of Bradford in the United Kingdom, and he also works in the National Dialogue Commission, and his insights, perspectives, research papers are all highly valued and appreciated in the academic as well as in public life. Dr. Yonas, it is great to have you on this program. Let's begin with your reaction to the peace agreement signed between government of Ethiopia and the Tigray People Liberation Front.
I just really like to describe it as a right move in the right direction. And I see it as a very positive, a very encouraging step in this peace-hungry continent, particularly in extremely direly looking for peace situation in the Horn of Africa. As you can see, it's coupled with climate change and food insecurity, entire population suffering from poverty. So if you add this crisis, particularly the fighting, it would definitely increase. So I'm very happy, I'm delighted.
Just what are the most important parts of the agreement that can guarantee this country a permanent end to the conflict? What were the key points?
I think as philosophy of science teaches us, we have got nothing permanent on this planet. Things are in change, in very all the time in dynamism. So there's dynamics keeping on. Anything permanent is that it changes itself. And so after having built that caveat at the background, then I go straight to answering your question. The most important parts of the agreement are ceasefire, stopping the fight. Day one, even for 1 minute, if we really saved a dying life, that is success. And then look at billions of birds, which should have been spent in schooling, in health, in agriculture, but going to simply, killing each other, saving that is the second one, to be honest. For me, the first one is stopping the fight, ceasing the fire. And that ceasefire is absolutely important. And secondly, hopefully, it could also hold, that is my optimistic attitude towards that it shows Africans can handle their problems. So African-led solution truly works because this is well guided by the African Union and the two fighting parties. So this sends a huge signal to the rest of the world that Africans can handle their own problem and they can solve their problems. So that is, to me, the second part or the third part of the very agreement, that two parties agreeing, trusting African Union, trusting each other, accepting the proposal. To me, that is extremely important. Followed by that, disarming particularly irregular army, because in any country you expect monopoly of violence, as we call it in political science, is only to be held by a state, a government that's leading the country, a government which is recognized by the United Nations and the rest of course, other state players, as we call it in political science. So any irregular army, any armed body really is unacceptable for normal function of peace and security provision to citizens. So that is another extremely important one. Disarming the fight, particularly the rebel group, to me is another extremely important aspect.
You have touched upon a very important point, African solutions to African problem. And The agreement was signed not a long time after Dana Forum, which just happened in the city in Bahar Dar. How do you react to the timing? After the Dana Forum, we have this agreement in place.
Very important question. It also resonates with our own organization. You might have watched, maybe I was presenting in Dana Forum itself, and as a former director of IPSS, one of the founding members of Dana Forum itself, I had to have maybe interview. It's in Amharic Diplomacy Action Program, our diplomacy program. You might just see it's number 21. You can have a look at there. And also on the very occasion I had to present the way forward, because we were celebrating the 10th anniversary of Dana Forum. So what is, for the next 10 years, what's to be done? As Dana Forum is an African agenda. It is organized by African Union in the main, the Peace and Security Studies of Addis Ababa University as a secretariat, and of course Prime Minister's Office and that of the Minister of Foreign Affairs as watching over, viewing over what we're doing. So I think the timing, as you rightly said, all the participants in Dana Forum, particularly political leaders, including former Prime Minister of Ethiopia, His Excellency Ato Hailemariam Desalegn, and all those envoys, so the UN envoy to Horn of Africa, the US envoy to Horn of Africa, the EU envoy of Horn of Africa, and the AU envoy of Horn of Africa, all were there. And at the same time, they were all echoing how significant the agenda that is particularly developing resilience and making work what's known as African solution for African problems as a whole. They should emanate from Africa rather than cut and paste on African context or be dictated by the West or the East, but rather the very problem is in Africa, therefore solution should also be from Africa. That discussion was just concluded. And now, next week we are running post-Dana Forum. So in between this, when you see that peace agreement between the Ethiopian government and the rebel groups definitely symbolizes and signifies theory and practice coming together, what has been discussed, what has been debated at intellectual level, at leaders level, at policy level, going into implementation by, again, all those levels, and people really, ordinary people, testing, I would say that practicing, feeling how research really works, how discussions, debates, policy decisions work for making peace. So to me, this is an absolutely apt APT, apt in timing, and it is precise. So it is also at what we call in peace and security studies, making knowledge work for the transformation of society. So it really resonates with what we have been so far talking about. So we are walking the talk, and I'd like to congratulate all parties who took part in it, and I'm absolutely delighted to see that happening. And the timing was absolutely precise.
One thing that really catches our mind is the disarmament part. And that really takes us back to the point you raised about the monopoly of using arms and using armed power solely resides only to the government. And so that has been contested in the past 2 years. And what kind of lesson could this agreement give us as we move forward?
That also is packed with a lot of ideas, by the way. So those irregular organizations calling themselves liberation of this and that ethnic groups, those self-styled military leaders calling themselves military leaders, and that simply that is not acceptable in fundamental understanding of a social contract. Social contract fundamentally is between a state and society. The state takes care of peace and security of the society, the citizens, and society pays tax. So that is social contract. For this social contract, you need only government to be armed, not any other, unless described otherwise, such as private ownership of arms. So that is also to be ratified. That is to be also certified by designated body of government, such as police and municipalities, as studies, particularly governance studies, peace and security studies, clearly shows. So the implication of disarming the rebel movement has huge implication for others who are, as we said, as we now speak, there are some irregular armies in the western part of Ethiopia, southern part of Ethiopia, and it also sends clear message that they too should be disarmed. In the same time, only the state must monopolize violence. It is only the state that is accepted, as we said, one of 5 characteristics of any state in the world. One is, of course, its legitimate use of power, because it is a member state of the UN, it is recognized as an independent entity, and it has population and government. So that is the only way. And so the message is very clear that those who are aspiring to have their own arms, or their own independent fighting force, is absolutely unacceptable in a civilized society anywhere, to be honest, not only Ethiopia. In 193 UN member countries, it's not acceptable. You can see in any state formation, in any constitution, you can't have two armies, armed groups in one country. So it has no exception when it comes to Ethiopia. And so that contestation, which existed for 2-3 years, was simply because of transition from the former EPRDF-led government to now the new government. So it was a transition chaos, and now I'm sure it will come back to order. That's our understanding and prayer, and working for that.
Signing a peace agreement is one thing, and implementing that on the ground is another thing. Just when we look at the history of the Tigray People Liberation Front and its long history, we haven't had much evidence about just entering into an agreement and honoring it afterwards. And what do you think of this?
In the introduction, we set a caveat saying that only permanent thing in the world is change. So we hope things are changing. The change in the situation might also dictate the parties you have just mentioned. That might also necessitate those people or those parties to think again, and implementing this peace accord, peace agreement, is for good for all, not for only one side, to be honest. So if we really are thinking of prosperity of a nation, survival of a nation and the entire people, then I think we should believe in the philosophy of peace by peaceful means, and also walk the talk. Once you agreed, you are bound by your words. Implementing that agreement measures up to how much a person or an entity you are. And this signature was done not in secret, but in public, by the African leaders, by international observers in their presence. So irrespective of the background history, because we now belong to the 21st century, because things have changed, even this unipolar world is changing into multipolar. And that monopoly of politics, security, economy of the West is being challenged, and things are changing. So I think it is for their own good if they respect and live up to the signature, the agreement, and expectation of the entire international, as well as, of course, local communities here.
What are just the variables that lead to these parties to the agreement and forces them to implement these agreements at this moment in time?
Well, really, what are these factors, both internal and external? Internally, look at what's going on where the rebels are operating. What is really concrete evidence there? Luckily or unluckily, both parties happen to know both parties at the same time. And those who call themselves rebels, some of them are former colleagues and students. And the same is true from this side as well. What is on the ground? Overall, if you just take things, I think resource is a problem. And you can see people suffering, to be honest, due to lack of the very survival means, such as food to eat. The aid stopped because of the fight. Then how could the people continue to sustain their life? Seriously speaking, internationally, look at the West being highly challenged. The Ukraine conflict is one, if you like. What's happening in Taiwan is another. The entire Africa being the center of gravity for both West and East. You can see how Africa is aligning with, who they're aligning with, because they have to look back who was involved in enslaving Africa, colonizing Africa, dehumanizing Africa. So Africa must rise up. And now things became clear for the West as well. If they don't deal systematically with the matters of 21st century, and unless they really take care, they are going to lose all Africa. And so that is also another force which cannot, deliberately, I like to dodge it diplomatically. And simply these are pushing forces, if you like. A simple example can be the presence of foreign power in Djibouti, the competition you can see to control Africa. You can see from China, Russia, Japan, many others there, and the West at the same time competing. But because of the past history, Africa resents the West, the way they behave, their interference in internal affairs. And then they see the other party that does not interfere in internal affairs of countries, but rather respecting diversity, believing in win-win approaches, peaceful coexistence. Then people have choice to make. So these are some of the external factors. And the internal one being the need, the dire need for a lot of other equipment which are necessary for fight, to sustain the fighting itself. So these together, I think, and finally maybe the realization of these facts brought back to the agreement.
There is a saying that the devil is in the detail. So what are the pitfalls that could challenge the implementation of this agreement as you see it?
Right. I like the devil is indeed the detail, because when you go to the detailed specified items, when you go from paper to the ground, definitely there could be some variations. And what do we see now, particularly from the rebel side, those who are in diaspora, or almost disagreeing or telling to the face, speaking, coming with some negative propaganda, because they are away from reality here in Ethiopia, how people are suffering, they don't understand it. The people suffering, to be honest. We know each other very well here. But those who live in diaspora, because they're in an ivory tower, they don't care. They're more interested in making money. And at the same time, adding some fuel to the fire here so that they can make their life better, rather than paying attention to what is happening on the ground. What the people in Tigray, in Amhara, in Afar need, those who are affected by the conflict. They just look at only their comfort zone. And to me, that is absolute failure to understand the factual situations, reality on the ground. So the details, these of the agreement itself, when you start disarming, when you start DDRing, that is disarm, demobilize, and reintegrate the former fighting parties, what happens then? The technicality aspects. These could maybe raise some technical implementation, I don't even call it problems, but maybe some difficulties. But I'm sure the very principle is right. The very agreement on peace is right. then the implementation can also be successfully done, irrespective of those irregularities and disagreements by those dissidents who failed to understand what's going on in Tigray, in Amhara, in Afar particularly, and the rest of Ethiopia as a whole, because we all are affected by the war, not only one part. All parts of Ethiopia have been affected, to be honest. As you know, if one body of our party is sick, the entire body is sick. So we all are affected, because those who live in diaspora, I don't like the word diaspora itself, but those who live outside of, African reality, they don't understand what we are suffering, what we are facing on a daily basis. So their fake news could sometimes play a role of a spoiler. And I'm sure the parties also are very well aware of these actualities, and they can also take some precautionary measures. So these are, for the time being, my assessments.
I know you're actively engaging with the Ethiopian National Dialogue Commissioner's leadership team, and how important is this agreement for the Commission to do its activities in an inclusive manner?
We take negotiation as a subdivision of dialogue. Dialogue is a huge encompassing concept. It deals with the structural causes of conflict, age-old conflicts, could be interpretation of history, identity questions, resource mobilization, marginalization. The list is long. So this is a success of negotiation, two parties coming together, discussing with each other, and penning down agreement, for us is a stepping stone, to be honest. It helps us. It absolutely helps us. If you remember, some 2-3 months ago, I was interviewed by different international and national media. And at the time I reported that we went to all parts of Ethiopia, and then they asked him, how about Tigray? I told them, yes, we're going to go to Tigray as well. It's simply a matter of time. And absolutely, if the war stops, fine. And if even though they were labeled terrorists, we have a different way or mechanism of even engaging with them through third parties, through international community as well. That's how I responded by then, mind you, 3-4 months ago. And now it's quite a reality. And I'm absolutely delighted. God is great. I'm very happy about that. So I see it as an excellent opportunity for us to engage, discuss directly, just go to decouple those coded, those entrenched psychological subliminal feelings of each other as enemies while being a family, to be honest. And why this happened, and how the grassroots level people understand that. And then what are their agenda? After having extracted those agendas, then we have to come to address the age-old causes of conflict, and then pave the way for sustainable peace and development in our country. And we take the success of this accord or agreement or peace as an excellent opportunity for the National Dialogue Commission, for it clears the ground for us.
It is great to have you on this program. Thank you for your enlightening views. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you very much indeed for having me, and thank you very much again. Thank you.
Dear viewers, you have been watching the Messenger program. This is all we get for today. I think you get valuable information about the peace agreement from a celebrated and highly respected peace and security scholar, Dr. Yonas Sadaye Adeto. Thank you for watching.